Morning, Valentine. Morning, Rotus. How are you guys today?
Well,
Fine,
thank
thanks.
you.
Fine, thanks.
Join the conversation. You can watch Wonu, myself, Rotus live on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/Smooth981 FM Lagos. So just type Smooth FM Lagos in the search box, subscribe and watch. You can also send messages through WhatsApp 0809 444 0981. That's 0809 444 0981. You can send a message through Twitter. The hashtag to add is Business Express 981. Rotus?
Thank you so much. Wonuola, of course, is the head of financial institutions, sales, and global markets at Stanbic IBTC. So, Wonu, again, thank you so much for joining us. What do we have? I think we had a bond auction, sovereign bond auction, FGN, Federal Government Nigerian bond auction. Can you take us through some of the results, what you saw at that auction?
All right. Thanks a lot, Rotus. So yesterday we saw the DMO offer a total of about 150 billion across 2027 bonds, 2035s, and 2045 bonds. They offered 50 billion each across those three tenors. However, they ended up selling about 157.95 billion to the public, and also sold about 116.5 in non-competitive allotment. Obviously, results clearly showed that it was oversubscribed to the tune of about 274 billion. So, I mean, stop rate showed that on the 27th, it closed at 4.5. On the 2035 as well, it closed at 13.34. And on the 2045s, it closed at 13.85, which was like an average of about 200 basis points from the last auction, higher from the last auction. So it just shows the rates have just basically been on one direction. I mean, going up. You can argue chasing inflation, but I think it's clear that government needs to borrow, and they're ramping up on borrowing. Now, with regards to what we expect, we expect market will open around these levels this morning, and and there's more incentive for people to sell bonds, at higher levels, so we might start to see this bond trend towards 14%, ahead of the next auction. However, we expect that maybe an inflection point, will be when either GMO shows less aggression in borrowing, and that's if they basically get good demand on the euro bond. We expect them to have a euro bond roadshow soon. And I do note that they have sent RFPs to the book runners. So once they're done with interviews and stuff, probably they'll need to get approval from the Senate again and SEC. They will definitely go on a euro bond roadshow. And if basically based on their borrowing plan for foreign borrowing, they could raise up to $5 to $6 billion there. So if they get that in, they might show less aggression in basically selling the local bonds, or ultimately yields are expected to trade wider.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So you mentioned inflation. I guess with the rates going up and it being the bond auction being oversubscribed, one would argue that in sentiment was not dampened by the fact that inflation is at 18% right now.
Well, if you look at the range of bids, right, the lowest range was 7 and the highest range was 16. So it's clear that even investors obviously aren't bidding close to inflation. Again, if you look at historically, bonds have always averaged, around between 14 and 15% historically. I mean, they've printed as the highest a bond printed was over 17.3%. So I don't expect us to get there anytime soon. But there's obviously still room for it to trade wider than current levels. So it's not. I don't think investors were dampened by that fact, by the fact that it didn't print that high. They were not even bids close to those levels.
Gotcha. For our listeners, I mean, these are big numbers being thrown out. Who exactly can participate in these auctions?
Well, I mean, literally everyone, right? Individuals, corporates, PFAs, insurance companies, banks. Literally everyone participate at the auction. The main thing is that you have to bid through a bank that is a primary market dealer.
Oh, but I think the minimum is for the big boys and girls. So what's the minimum on these auctions?
Yeah, it's about 50 million. However, like I always say you can always walk to any Stanbic branch and buy from the secondary market. I believe the minimum there is about 100,000 naira. So you don't have to participate at the auction, but you can always get good levels from the secondary market.
Okay, good. So for our listeners, if you're like me and you don't have 50 million to participate, head into a Stanbic IBTC branch and you can do 100,000 minimum. Valentine, you're laughing. I can do.
There are levels to this.
Exactly. So Stanbic is giving options for people at least 100K level secondary market. That sounds great. Wonuola, I want to talk FX if we can. The central bank governor, I think at a recent virtual forum, was assuring exporters that they can definitely get their export proceeds when it comes to, and he was like, okay, look, you guys have to just make sure you repatriate back to the country and so on and so forth. These assurances from the central bank governor to exporters with regards to the way things are in the FX market, do they sound reassuring to you?
Well, again, I mean, so if you look at CBN, right, what they're trying to do is more reserve management, right? And to basically do that, they need the likes of exporters, to repatriate back, their funds. However, these exporters as well do have obligations. They some of them import as well. So the expectation is that they repatriate their export proceeds back and then utilize those export proceeds for some of their import. Now, in terms of whether it's going to give confidence, again, I mean, one major question one would ask is why aren't exporters repatriating back, right? And would this give them any additional incentive? Well, I mean, from my perspective, I doubt that. It's really just more reiterating the fact that yes, I mean, they should abide by the exchange control rules, by basically, bringing back their export proceeds. And obviously telling them that, yes, you would have access to it. I mean, I believe they already do know that, right? But him just reiterating it is just to showing that concern to say, okay, I mean, anything that basically helps the reserves, anything that basically helps FX stability, would basically be promoted and encouraged by the CBN.
Great stuff. So that being said, how would, based on the market participants you're talking to, and so what's the sentiment like with the present FX situation? Is the backlog still high? Is there still liquidity? What's it looking like?
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at the total backlog, we estimate that to be about $4 billion, right? And I mean, foreign portfolio investors have about $2 billion backlog. So the other really is from the corporates. I mean, just recently, CBN resumed sales of FX to foreign portfolio investors. That was basically, I think that started last week, on Monday. And in that bracket, they sold about $8 million. Now, I mean, if you compare that to the over $2 billion demand, it's basically abysmal. But we expect that the CBN will continue to ramp up volume as they get more inflows. And that's why the borrowings are critical. The Eurobond borrowing is critical. Yesterday, we saw in the news as well that the Senate approved a $1.5 billion budget support from the IMF and the World Bank as well. And then another about over 900 million euros, from other DFIs. I mean, obviously, the 1.5 is meant for budget support to the states and for COVID relief. And then the other, from the other DFIs, the 900 million euros is for the agricultural sector. I had to want to import some tractors, But again, from a CBN perspective, all of that would have to be reserved, right? And it just means that it gives them more ammunition to continue to intervene. So if you look at the breakdown of interventions across year to date, on the secondary market intervention sales, I mean, for the retail SMEs, they've sold about $2 billion there, and they average about 500 a month, and that's basically targeted at mostly corporates and multinational. They do other spot intervention sales as well, and that's very tiny, about 3.75 million. And for PTA, school fees, and SMEs, they've intervened about $1 billion there. And for one CNY, Chinese one intervention, they've done about $160 million there. So if you look at the total sales yet to date on just all these interventions, they've done about $3.3 billion in sales. So it's very clear that all these borrowings are basically critical, especially for the CBN, in order to maintain a healthy reserves. Reserves currently are at 5.18 billion, right? I mean, obviously, if those inflows come in, then it basically goes much higher than that. But I mean, particularly answering your question directly, the sentiment hasn't still changed, right? Investors basically just want to get their money out. And I mean, with the reserves at this level, they believe CBN should ramp up volumes even more than what they've planned. I mean, that'll be the expectation. And obviously, after getting out their money, they'll reassess. They'll have a look again. I mean, other markets have generally benefited from the risk-on sentiment across the globe. We see people piling on into Egypt. We see people piling into Ghana. We see people going to even Uganda, right? And if you compare our yields across, I mean, they aren't so far off. So like Egypt, if you take away all the withholding tax for a one-year investment, its yields around 10.5, right? And Nigerian automobiles already yield around 11.2. But again, what's inflation in Egypt, right? Inflation in Egypt is just about 4.5 thereabouts, why we at 18.1, same with Uganda as well. Inflation there is about 4.7 thereabouts, and their yields are also around 11. But Ghana, I mean, has a significantly higher yield, about 16% for one-year bills, but inflation there is just around 10. So the optics aren't too good for Nigeria in terms of investor sentiment, right? But again, I believe things will quickly change if we have good reforms on the FX. If people are allowed to trade freely, then you would definitely see people, look at it again and start selling dollars, because obviously it's very critical that we need foreign portfolio investors come in, because it's just almost like when NNPC was just a major supplier. Now CBN as well is a major supplier of FX, and that's why you see that they're talking to exporters, to bring back in funds, and I mean the next step is also to try and get foreign portfolio investors back in.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for that breakdown. Thank you.
There was a message here from Joel. He said, if I invested 1 million naira in bonds at 10%, does it mean I get 100,000 naira annually? What does that mean? Or what does the coupon mean? That was Joel's question.
Okay, I mean, so if you invest, and depending on the bond, so let's assume the bond pays 10% in coupon, it then means you get 50,000 semi-annually. So you would get 50,000 every 6 months.
Yeah.
Cumulatively,
so that's 100,000.
Yeah.
Awesome. Rotus, did you catch this story of yesterday? Well, it hasn't broken. Well, it's broke yesterday. The governor of Lagos State, Junior Sanwo-Olu, announced the Lagos COVID-19 Action Recovery and Economic Stimulus Program, and they released $20 million under the Lagos Cares Program to support 125,000 individuals and cover 69 markets and a minimum of 2,500 SMEs. Will be supported.
$20 million.
Yes, dollars.
I didn't hear about that.
It just broke 11 hours ago. He published it on his
the Lagos
Instagram
State
handle.
official channels. Does it come from Lagos State?
Lagos State Governor's official Instagram handle.
20 million. Fantastic. Well, let's look into
$20 million.
Yeah,
2,512 SMEs, 125,058 individuals, and 69 markets.
Interesting to see what the qualifications are for that. That's big
exactly.
news.
Thank you.
How do they qualify? We investigate it. Big news.
Thank you, Wonuola Akanbi. Thank you so much.
And once again, Wonuola Akanbi, Head of Financial Institutions Sales at Global Markets at Stanbic IBTC. Thank you so much for taking us through markets, Wonuola. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Cheers, guys.
You too. All right. If you have further questions, please send them to Rotus on Twitter at Rotanquotes.